I think we have already established on this channel that the Netherlands have many amazing zoos, and Apenheul is no exception and a very special park indeed. Loosely translated, Apenheul means monkey sanctuary, so it should come as no surprise that this zoo is all about monkeys and apes. In total, 35 different species await us here, from small marmosets to great apes. And all this in a park that largely dispenses with cages and bars, and in many ways has set new standards in animal husbandry, still remaining a shining example of what's possible to this day. At least for the most part. There are also a few things I have to criticize, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Because as always, we will take a very close look at the park in this video, and if you like that, please subscribe to the channel so that we can celebrate 10,000 subscribers rather soon. Thank you so much, and let's get going. Apenheul is located in the Dutch province of Gelderland on the outskirts of the city Apeldoorn. More precisely, it's based in a large park and forest area, so even the walk to the entrance is the first little highlight here. Once you arrive at the entrance, it's a good idea to read through the rules of conduct again, and if necessary, you have to stow your provisions in the monkey-proof bags provided. Because here in Apenheul there are a lot of walk-through enclosures where you can get really close to the monkeys, or better yet, the monkeys can come very close to you. The very first example of this is the enclosure for squirrel monkeys, which is basically just a very large forest area, which was turned into even more of a monkey playground with ropes hung up. The squirrel monkeys really have a lot of space here, so you may have to look around for a while, but I even spotted a mother with her baby. Already within the forest of squirrel monkeys, you will find the first monkey islands as well. And the woolly monkeys living on one of them are quite the rarity. There are only 8 places in Europe where you can see them right now. The howler monkeys on the other island can be found in more zoos, but are also not a very common sight. Both monkey islands are embedded in the wooded surroundings quite beautifully and offer the monkeys a lot of climbing opportunities, both man-made and natural. Once we left the squirrel monkeys forest and passed this rest area where you can eat something in between, the next walk-through enclosure awaits us right away with even more New World monkeys. But in the once again rather spacious outdoor area, I only got to see red titis. The white-faced sarkies, golden-headed lion tamarins, and silvery marmosets all preferred to stay indoors. Thankfully though, you can look into their indoor space via glass panels, so you get the chance to see them whether they stay inside or decide to go out. There are also red-footed tortoises here, one of the few species that is neither monkey, ape or lemur. Which brings us right into the next walkthrough enclosure, where we can discover quite a few lemur species. And yes, as any regular viewer knows, walk-through lemur enclosures are nothing special. They can be found in many zoos all across of Europe, but this one is probably the very best. Once again, it's a very large space and a forested area with many natural climbing opportunities, complemented by man-made climbing structures. So the different lemur species have a lot of space to avoid each other as well as the visitors, though especially the ring-tailed lemurs were not exactly shy and didn't seem to mind the people around them. The best chance to see all the different lemurs is at feeding time, of course. Here the red ruffed lemurs and the black and white ruffed lemurs went straight for the food, while the smaller crowned lemurs were a bit more hesitant, given that despite their name, they are not the dominant species here. During feeding you can also learn a lot about the animals, since it's also a keeper's talk, though you have to understand Dutch, of course. Besides the aforementioned lemur species, which are all more or less common in European zoos, Apenheul has also 2 rarities. Blue-eyed black lemurs can be found only in 8 different zoos across Europe, and the beautiful crown sifacas can, outside of Madagascar, only be seen in 5 European zoos. Both of them Some live in separated enclosures within the bigger lemur area. And what's more, the Bonobo house is also located within the walkthrough enclosure. Inside the building, visitors can get very close to the smallest of the great apes thanks to large viewing windows. A large panoramic pane in the center provides a view into the main indoor area, while the sections on the left and right can also be seen. But below there should be additional off-show areas where the animals can retreat. From the roof of the building, you can also look onto the large Bonobo Island, which the path later leads back to, allowing you to view the enclosure once again from a different angle. But no matter the perspective, one thing becomes clear here as well. This is another generously sized forested area, and even though the bonobos can't demonstrate their climbing skills in the trees, they can do so on the climbing structures provided. However, there is one major drawback to the bonobo housing here. There are two groups. In the wild, bonobos live in large communities that temporarily split into smaller subgroups and later reunite during the day. This is known as fission and fusion. And from what I've heard, Apenheul is trying to adapt this with two loose groups, which is in principle, of course, a great approach. But there is only one outdoor enclosure here, so they have to take turns staying indoors. And even though both groups are given the chance to go outside during the day, and it seems like the staff is doing their best to keep the animals indoors occupied with enrichment, this setup is, of course, far from ideal. Moving on, when we finally leave the lemur enclosure behind, we get to a bigger rest area with a restaurant and a playground from which we can make our way to the orangutans. They live here on 4 separate island enclosures, all of which are similarly designed and equipped with tall climbing structures. In total, 160 wooden poles, each 12 meters high, were installed and connected with ropes, allowing the orangutans to move from A to B high above the ground just as they would in the wild. And as you can already see, it makes for a spectacular sight. And as someone who loves orangutans, they were my favorite animals as a child. Seeing them this active was my absolute highlight. Perspectives like this are made possible by the visitor path that loops around the islands and is elevated to about 4 meters in height, putting you more or less on eye level with the orangutans. Embedded by the dense greenery of the surrounding trees, the path also leads to the orangutan house halfway through, which visitors can enter as well. Inside you move in the middle in between the 4 indoor enclosures, which can be viewed through large glass panels. Each indoor area comprises 1,500 cubic meters and includes 2 separation rooms that can be used as corridors as well. So the indoor areas are connected, allowing the animals to be brought together or separated as needed without any difficulty. This really is exemplary husbandry, and that's not just my opinion. The European Association of Zoos and Aquaria itself cites the facility here in Apenheul alongside Chester Zoo as examples in their best practice guidelines for great apes. And there is another great detail. Just beyond the 4 orangutan islands is the enclosure for the Javan langurs, a relatively rare species in Europe that can be found in 20 zoos according to Zootierliste. And what I really liked here is that through a rotating bridge, the langurs can be given access to one of the orangutan outer areas, allowing them to be socialized together at times. Next up, the aviary for the collared mangabees looks a bit unusual here because of the mesh, but on the other side of the building, where you can also view in the indoor areas, you realize that it actually serves more as a secondary enclosure or holding area. This, however, is the main outdoor area, which is way more in line with what you're probably expecting at this point. Just like the enclosure for the lion-tailed macaques across from it, which is is also spacious, naturalistic, and full of climbing opportunities. Exactly the kind of standard you can expect for nearly every enclosure here in Apenheul. And of course, the next walkthrough enclosure isn't far. This one is for Barbary macaques, the only monkey that is also naturally living in Europe. So it's a little bit ironic that of all things, their enclosure is a little bit less natural by comparison, as this is the only area in the zoo where artificial rocks are heavily used. The enclosure stands out a bit, but personally I don't mind, especially because I really like the way the path was laid out, partly even through the artificial rocks, and the macaques won't care anyway, and none of them will think to complain about the slide that was placed in the middle of their enclosure either. Many other zoos keep Barbary macaques in walk-through enclosures as well, or they are housed together with other species, most commonly and quite fittingly with Barbary sheep. Here in Apenheul, however, they live together with donkeys, which can only access the lower part of the enclosure. And now we have finally reached the enclosure that could very well be considered the heart of Apenheul. Because the enormous gorilla habitat covering over 1 hectare is truly something special. It's one of the biggest gorilla enclosures in the entire world. I think Bronx Zoo is one of the few zoos that actually has a bigger one. And that becomes even more impressive when you realize that it was already built in the 1970s. Much newer, from 2004, is Bonobo, the amphitheater where visitors can watch the gorilla feeding from the stands. Here, once again, you can learn a great deal about the animals by listening to the keeper, and if you have any questions, you can ask them as well. And even though I unfortunately don't speak Dutch myself, I do understand it well enough to pick up, for example, that the gorillas don't always sit in the same spot during feeding, and also that the 100 man versus 1 silverback question was casually answered with first you'd have to find 100 crazy guys willing to try. The Rotterdam-born photographer Wim Macher, who founded Apenheul in 1971, must have been one crazy guy to build such an enormous gorilla enclosure all the way back in the 1970s. Back then, this was of course revolutionary, and as mentioned, even 50 years later, it's still something remarkable. And you would think that finding anything to complain about, you'd need a magnifying glass rather than binoculars, but unfortunately, that impression is deceiving. At least on my visit, the indoor areas were closed off, but just take a look at these pictures and you will see that they are terrible by today's standards. So one of the best outdoor enclosures for gorillas in Europe comes with one of the worst indoor facilities, and that's a shame. Furthermore, since a second group was formed in 1987, the originally even larger island was divided, but not exactly evenly. The second enclosure offers only a fraction of the space and looks like a very average zoo exhibit at best. This is also where I spotted the lost monkeys, which are supposed to be mixed with the gorillas on the larger island as well. To be clear, taken on its own, this enclosure isn't necessarily catastrophically bad, but a sensible allocation of space would look very different, which the people in charge seem to agree. There's not much concrete information out there yet, but the gorilla habitat is set to be redesigned hopefully by 2028, with newly allocated islands and presumably a new indoor section as well. From what I can tell, they are still in the process of raising the at least 4 million euros needed, and you can donate to the project too if you'd like to. Interestingly, the architect they are planning the project with, Martijn de Geus, actually worked here as a zookeeper from 2002 to 2008. The path around the large gorilla island also passes a gibbon island, which has also been very generously designed, and the northern white-cheeked gibbons living here can climb high up into the trees. Then the path reaches another rest and playground area, and finally another walk-through enclosure. I would describe it to you, but I think the footage already shows that I would just sound like a broken record. Although there is an elevated path here, so you can observe the monkeys living here even better. There are even more New World monkeys here, again including white-faced sakis and additional marmosets such as bearded emperor tamarins. Something completely different, however, is the small Nocturnal house. Inside you enter a single walkthrough room where grey-handed night monkeys move about under the cover of the simulated night. One of the monkeys even had a juvenile on its back, which was of course incredibly cute. Sloths also live here, making this another of the few exceptions in what is otherwise almost a pure primate zoo. Behind the walkthrough enclosure is the elevated path from which you can view the second gorilla habitat, and this is also where you get the second perspective of the Bonobo island, which, by the way, originally used to be part of the gorilla enclosure as well. Furthermore, there are additional small islands for capuchin monkeys and a larger one for Colombian black spider monkeys, which you can also view from the elevated pathway, and the spider monkeys are socialized with capybaras, a perfect fit as a secondary species, although as rodents they are another exception. I also found the following enclosure for grey langurs really fascinating. The website refers to them as the largest free-ranging monkeys in Apenheul, although free-ranging only means that they live in a walk-through enclosure, I guess, which is very unusual. Please let me know if you know another example of this. On my visit, the langurs stayed in an area that was behind a net though, but as you can see they had juveniles, so I'm not complaining. At the next rest area, I finally treated myself to some fries, with a view of the islands of the howler monkeys and the white-faced capuchins. It was a delight in more ways than one. There's also a large adventure playground here where children can really let off steam. Then, to conclude, you enter the final walkthrough enclosure, home to the adorable northern telepan monkeys, which are kept here together with tortoises. And I almost forgot that king colobuses also live here, because sadly I didn't see them. Opened in 2023, it's one of the newest exhibits in the park, and I think it's beautifully designed, with dense planting, water features, plenty of climbing structures and various retreat areas for the animals. And the indoor areas are also visible through a glass wall, which is where I saw the tortoises. A truly lovely way to finish our tour before exiting through the zoo shop, sending us straight to the conclusion. And overall, of course, the verdict is very positive. Especially the numerous walk-through enclosures show wonderfully how well Apenheul generally manages to combine visitor experiences with great, spacious animal habitats. That perhaps makes it all the more disappointing that my enthusiasm is dampened by just a few, but one serious drawback. But well, those exist pretty much everywhere. Nevertheless, I really hope that the revamped gorilla enclosures will be completed by 2028, because if that turns out well, we are ultimately talking about one of the most consistently excellent zoos out there. Even as it stands, Apenheul historically, but also here and now, is an absolute prime example that private zoos too can set new standards for the zoo world. What has been achieved here is remarkable, especially because the commitment to research and conservation is truly admirable as well. Among other things, through its own conservation fund, support for a bonobo reintroduction project, animal welfare research in the park, as well as research projects in the wild. This park is definitely not only for human primate enthusiasts, but also truly lives up to its name as a wonderful haven for the primates themselves. Accordingly, Apenheul gets an absolute recommendation from me, at least, of course, if you happen to like primates. I have to say it bothers me a little bit that I came a few years too late to still see proboscis monkeys here, so I guess I have to go to Singapore then. Maybe one could say that it's a bit of a pity that there hasn't been a comparably special monkey species here since then. Well, let's put it this way, I personally would have preferred to see the first golden snub-nosed monkeys in Europe here rather than in the already completely overloaded Paradisa, but that's just a side note and it only slightly reduces the park's wow factor. Feel free to let me know your opinion on Apenheul in the comments, leave a thumbs up, and also feel free to use the new hype feature. And if you want to know whether I will actually safari travel to Singapore, well, I guess you have to subscribe, if only for more European zoos for now. From the Netherlands, Amersfoort and Rotterdam are still coming up, for example. That's it from me for today. Thank you very much for your attention. See you soon. Take care. Yours truly, Martin. Or, as we say in Germany, auf Wiedersehen. Das war's jetzt aber auch. Klappe zu, Affe tot. Es folgt nur noch ein bisschen Affentheater, in dem ich in einem Affenzahn einige affige Sprüche raushaue und mich dabei völlig zum Affen mache. Aber nochmal, wenn ihr denkt, affenstarkes Video, dann gebt dem Affen Zucker und drückt den Daumen nach oben.